If humanity is to ward off some of the most extreme effects of climate change that we're already starting to experience, then the half measures that we've been taking as a species and as a series of governments, a system of governments around the globe, is not going to be enough. We need drastic action, and it looks like the Netherlands appear to be on the verge of something like that. The Dutch parliament has voted for a 55% cut in CO2 emissions by 2030, which is nice. Certainly over the next 14 years or so, that's going to provide some benefits. But to get to that, there is drastic action happening very soon in the very near future. 5 Dutch coal-fired power stations were closed last year, but the country still has another 5 plants in operation. 3 of them came online just last year and have already been blamed for a 5% rise in the country's emissions since last year. No more. After the vote that just happened, now it is currently non-binding, but it's expected to be acted on in the very near future, every single one of those coal plants will be shut down. The Dutch have eliminated the coal industry in their country. Now, it's not a perfect solution, and there are some consequences of that we're going to talk about, but that is how you fight climate change. That's how you cut emissions. You don't simply add another filter to the top of these factories. You cut them off and you move to some other form of energy. Now, again, it's complicated, and we'll get into it, but what do you think about this, Cenk?
Okay, not buying it. I'm pro coal. Protect the sacred.
Clean coal. Clean coal.
No, I'm kidding. So, listen, there is one argument that is important here. So some of these plants were authorized very recently. It was 2013, I believe. And so you let them set up these plants, and then you turn around and go, yeah, just kidding. Did you spend millions of dollars on that plant? Yeah.
Or billions, potentially.
Okay, yeah, a lot of money, right? God. So, to me, I would categorize that as not cool, even when we're talking about coal plants.
Yes, I agree. Not cool. Do it anyway.
Okay, no. I think I'm
off of their heads. Sorry about your head.
No. But I think I'm going to reach the same conclusion. So, not about their heads. Okay.
Off with their corporate metaphoric heads.
Okay, so here's how. Right. So first of all, as you explained, this is not binding yet. We'll see if the government winds up doing it. Only one of the coalition partners of the government right now is in favor of it, and right-wingers might win in the Netherlands and block this entirely. Okay. So I think the right thing here is eminent domain. So when we do eminent domain, for example, in America, we need to build a highway, and it's a very important highway that's going to connect the whole country, like back when Eisenhower did it, and that highway is going to run through your property. I'm going to pay you a fair market price for that, but I've got to build a highway or the train or things that are important. Now it's gotten, of course, absurd in America. Well, I'd like to build a mall. Well, it's not really me. It's my donor. And your house is inconveniently where he'd like to park his mall. Okay? And Donald Trump has done this in the past to build casinos and literally...
Thankfully, they didn't last long.
Yeah. That's true. They went bankrupt right away. So trying to kick little old ladies, literally in his case, to build a parking lot for limos. Unbelievable, right? So if they're willing to do eminent domain for that, and I know it's 2 different countries, I think it's fair for the people of Netherlands to say we care so much about climate change that we are going to pay a fair market price to end those coal power plants. You can't just come in and be like, coal fire plants, we're done with you. Oh, did you lose a couple $1 billion? Well, I guess sad day for you, right? And my guess is that is how they will do it, right? Yeah. I don't know the specifics of the proposals on how to do it, but yes, they will pay some sort of fair market price, and they explain that that's a price worth paying because not doing it, A, costs more money, and B, is worse for the planet. So if they make a joint decision as a country that we're willing to bear that price, but we're not willing to bear the price of climate change, wonderful. That's exactly what you should do.
Now, so here's some of the downsides or whatever. One, obviously, the Netherlands doing this is great, but for the world to avoid the worst effects of climate change, that is a very, 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 very small fraction of all that we have to do, unfortunately, but it is certainly a good example. The more immediate downside is that until they build alternative sources of energy and things like that inside of the Netherlands, this is going to lead in the short term to importing energy from outside of the Netherlands, some of which will have been generated by coal-fired power plants, which means that the overall emissions cut is still significant, but not as large as it might otherwise seem to be. And so that is something that they're going to have to work out. Hopefully, they will not elect that right-wing government spokesman for Greenpeace Netherlands spoke about Geert Wilders, one of the leaders that's expected to do quite well in the elections that are coming up within the next year, and said, he is a climate denier like Donald Trump, nothing more, nothing less, a right-wing, fact-free populist who denies the climate crisis and will not put any effort into solving it. And that is the threat of electing people like Wilders or Donald Trump, that they could literally stop us from doing what is necessary to save our civilization. But overall, over the past few days, have once again watched through most of Cosmos, half of which has to do with climate change. And it just reminded me, like, end of this. End of this. We move on. We have shown that we can innovate and we can develop technology and we can do complicated things like invent agriculture, for instance. We can conquer this. We cannot simply allow some well-connected, wealthy people who want profit in the short term to stop us from doing what is necessary to do to save the future of our civilization. And if it means shutting down a couple of coal plants in the Netherlands, then we need to do it. If it means much more significant change in the US, then we need to do that. We need to do it, and we can do it. We just need to get off our ass and actually make some progress.
Let me clarify. A couple of those power plants, 3 of them, came online not in 2013, but in 2015. So It was just last year.
And are cleaner than many of the coal plants that we have in the U.S.
That's fair, too. And the economic minister, Cenk of the Netherlands, says we'd be crazy if we shut them. So they are split on the issue, and it's not resolved yet. But it is good news that they have gone in the direction that John is asking for, we're all asking for. And I'll end on one more piece of good news. In the U.S., 94 coal plants were shut down last year, and 41 more are expected to be shut down in 2016. Now, that is not because of government action. Now, some of the rules that President Obama put into effect did affect it to some degree, but they were old plants that became too expensive to run, and there's cheap natural gas now, so they are shutting down because of economic forces. And yes, it is complicated. Part of the reason the coal plants are shutting down is because of fracking, but fracking has other issues as well. So hopefully we go in a virtuous cycle, though, towards where we need to be, which is renewable energy, so that we don't all bear the cost of climate change together and that we get to some sort of sanity and save the planet, because we kind of need it. Together we can change the media, make it more representative of you and not the powerful. Come join us, make a difference. tytnetwork.com/join.